was recently published out of Singapore mid last year, I think. And they were able to demonstrate that you could read people's brainwaves and turn them into images. So what they did was that they'd put you in an fMRI and they would show you an image and then look at your brainwave, and then show you an image and look at your brainwave. And like with enough of that data, they would be able to map what picture you were looking at to what your brainwaves look like. And then they would try to do the reverse process and essentially say, given these brainwaves, what image are you thinking about? Or like, what image are you looking at right now?
That's nuts. That's actually getting into Black Mirror territory of like, replaying your memories. And I don't want that to happen. I don't want to replay my memories. Some things I want to forget. Speaking of Apple, got one of their latest patents on using optical sensors to detect voice. So there is a use case of being able to send a laser, and then like depending on how that essentially interacts with your sound waves, because obviously sound waves make the air go back and forth, because that's what sound waves are. The interactions with that and the light that it receives back or bouncing off that air, or the person's skin or mouth or teeth or whatever, it can make a better approximation as to what they're saying. And so microphones in the future could be a mix between audio sensors, optical sensors, and maybe even gyroscopic sensors and like other stuff.
A friend of mine got married recently, and he designed, I don't really know what the right word is because I don't know how one actually does this. I need to talk to him about it more. Like a probiotic, so a bacteria that breaks down the chemical in your body that alcohol gets metabolized into. So that's what this, like, one of the things that this bacteria loves to feed on. And so the idea is that you take this probiotic and you start drinking about, I think, something like 30 minutes later. And this probiotic has had a little bit of time to distribute through your body, and it helps metabolize the things that your body metabolizes alcohol into, and it dramatically reduces your hangover. And I've only used it twice, but I can say both times I drank heavily and also badly in terms of, mixed alcohols, low quality alcohols. And both times I slept really well and didn't end up with a hangover the next day, which in my later years, AJ, is a miracle.
That's pretty cool. Did you notice anything like while you were drunk? Like did it take you more alcohol to get drunk or?
I find like drunkenness is really environmental, right?
Yeah. I have one drink and I'm good to go because like contextually everyone else is drunk.
You just need the slight inhibition lowering, and then you can hit the dance floor, tear it up.
Yeah. That's awesome. All right. Anything else top of mind?
Well, yes, but only the stuff that I prepped to actually talking about today. So no.
I did find a design agency in the UK that only does deep tech brands, which I thought was interesting. So it's the Sourdough.co.uk. And I don't mean to plug them. I don't know how good they are. I just like saw a website of a nuclear fusion company, and I do want to do an episode on nuclear fusion at some point. And I was like, this is a really cool website. And at the bottom it said, designed by the Sourdough. I'm like, okay. I click into that. And then I just see that they only do design for deep tech companies. So maybe if you need,
I don't need a new website. I need a website.
you hit them up. Yeah. And I thought this is so interesting. Like if I did a design agency, I think I'd do this because you can talk to the coolest companies, figure out how to tell their story in a really interesting way, and then present it.
Is this where you got this week's ideas from? Just looking at their portfolio companies?
No, I will though. I will go through their portfolio companies because that was one of the strategies. I spent a couple of hours researching, went into a weird rabbit hole on solar panels, and then just went into weird spaces, and then just started finding really interesting lists of deep tech companies out there. So I don't think we'll run out of stuff to talk about in 2024, if I'm being honest. There's just so much stuff out there, which is exciting.
Is it just me, or are you slightly bored of AI companies?
Yeah. I am, but I did find one that might excite you.
We should limit ourselves, like one AI company.
And it's only because of the use case. The rest of the stuff, I just haven't found. It's all kind of the same stuff, and then maybe there's just too much stuff coming out that you're just like, all right, I'm just filtering now. What is it? That thing we talked about, banner blindness?
Yeah, we saw that in crypto as well, right? Everything just became like crypto for blah. 99% of things weren't original. It's just the word crypto for in front of something that was a medium idea at best.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we're still kind of seeing that, right?
Actually, I saw one that was kind of interesting. They're called CryptoSat. So I actually met these guys a couple of times and saw them pivot a few times. And basically, if you're at all familiar with the crypto space, one of the key challenges is like how do you make sure nodes are operating securely and how you get around nodes that aren't operating securely. That's kind of the whole shtick. And their ideas was like you take these hardware validated nodes and you just throw them up into outer space where they can't be tampered with. So like you get some basic, well, at least when I spoke with them, you get some basic blockchain functionality and you deploy it into outer space. And then you can sort of shut it off from the rest of the world. And it's like it's the ultimate secure hardware, right? Because you can't reach it. And so if it has no software that enables you to remotely control it intentionally and it's sort of like autonomous, then yeah, it's the ultimate trusted hardware. I think they've since pivoted and they do a lot of other stuff now, which I guess makes sense. As a company, you're trying to make money and survive. But I thought it was a really cool, like a different approach to secure hardware, which was don't try to make the hardware uncrackable. Just put it in outer space when no one can get to it. So I think they launched Crypto 3, which is like their third satellite into space recently, very recently.
Wait, what does this say? ISS and then Crypto 2. Is the first one in the ISS?
I just saw the news that they launched Crypto 3.
Okay, interesting. You can see a live feed of where the satellites are. It's fascinating. That's a cool one. Was that part of your list? Or
you asked me about crypto, so I do cool things, Ajay.
I think anything in space is just cool. So, like, yeah, crypto plus space, awesome. Quantum plus space equals awesome. It's a very simple equation, I think. Okay, do you want to kick off today? Like, should we have a different scoring mechanism this time? We've used the gymnastics thing. I don't even remember.
It was just Tinder, right?
We can try something. Yeah, Tinder. We did Tinder. We can just stick to Tinder. Yeah. I think that's fine. All right, I'll kick off with so I have 4. 2 are big companies, 2 are startups. Let's start with one of the big companies. So, do you know Snapchat?
Huge user, AJ. I'm snapping right now and loving it.
You could be serious.
I think I used it. I used it tons when it first came out, and then because I was the demographic, and then alas, I'm no longer.
Because my brother is 5 years younger than me, and you're between. You're like a year younger than me. Okay, so you're still not in that generation. But I'm surprised that he's only 5 years younger than me, and he's like obsessed with Snapchat. Like that's the only thing he uses, and his generation is using it. Maybe it's mid to early 20s. I don't know what it is, but anyway, Snapchat's actually growing. So that's not actually what I'm meant to be talking about. But I did do a deep dive on Snapchat last year, and I realized that their user base is continuously growing, and they're actually doing pretty well. So it is an interesting company to just look at. They've also acquired so many different things. But what I wanted to talk about is that they launched a patent around reading books. So basically, you would have a QR code in your book, you would scan it, and as you're reading it, it's like an AR thing. So basically, you will have your pages come to life. So you can have interactive objects, interactive experiences, and just really get lost into a book. So let's read through this. So the user wears wearable electronic devices such as AR glasses that identify the printed codes in the text and seamlessly provide virtual objects within a mixed reality environment for the reader to interact with while reading. It brings the pages to life. One example is that in a science textbook teaching about gases, it allows users to interact with supersized gas molecules to understand the relationship between volume and pressure.
So someone actually designs this AR experience and then it puts it into a QR code on the page. It's not like generated on the fly, because I feel like with everything that's happened recently, AI plus Apple Vision Pro, you could just be looking at a book with Apple Vision Pro or like reading a book and just it could automatically figure out what's going on and pull it out and like make a 3D rendering of it for you. That's not so far.
That's a good point. I think you could do that. By the way, when I look at this image, I don't even know what's going on. It's such an insane diagram. Don't know why patent diagrams always. Well, that's how they usually are. The pattern drawings always like really, they have to be black and white, I'm pretty sure. Just like a very simple drawing. They're not meant to be super.
It's so weird though. It's got like annotation. He could not believe his eyes. It was a dragon just like in his favorite TV program. What the fuck?
Yeah, they're commenting on the kid, I'm guessing. Like, I don't even know what's the book. Maybe it's not a book, maybe it's in an aquarium. Yeah, it's just very confusing. Oh, actually, no, I think this is just the page of the book, and the kid is in the book. Okay, that makes a little more sense. And there's a QR code.
Great. I thought this was a diagram of the kid somehow experiencing this process. I love how that pattern includes the page number of the book in the bottom left-hand corner. Like that's patentable.
So one thing I think that's interesting, and this is slightly off topic, but it's just like it's relevant in some sense. There's a game called Tetris Effect Connected, which is just like a really intense Tetris game, right? It's on PS5, PS4. I've been kind of addicted to it recently, just been playing Tetris over and over again. My new goal is to become a Tetris world champion. But I was watching the Tetris world champion, and there was this weird thing where he started performing better when he had AR headset on versus like just looking at the screen. And the narrator was sort of like, I think one of the reasons why this is the case is because of the full immersion you get with VR. Like it just cuts out every single distraction and you just see this Tetris board and everything else is black. So I think there is something around this like reading books thing where if you can make books a little bit more engaging, where you're like fully immersed in this book, potentially people could read for longer and focus on things. So that's what I wanted to bring up with this whole AR book thing.
I can see the need for that. Like I could definitely see the need for getting people to read for longer. I mean, you hear a lot of anecdotes recently, especially in like higher education, that people are just so distractible these days. Like they cannot read for longer than a couple of pages at most at the university level. Professors be talking about this compared to 10 years ago when the same professors teaching the same courses would be dishing out 30 plus pages of reading and people would be fine with it. But I don't think that distracting the person from the act of reading by showing them stuff in 3D is the solution to that. I think the solution is the opposite. It's like, don't use any of this technology. Maybe the AR part where you just black everything out except the words that they're reading and force them as a human to generate these ideas on their own, like without that assistance, like go through that process and connect those neurons.
I think this is going to be the equivalent of 3D glasses in the cinema. Like it was cool when it came out and I was like, whoa, this is amazing. And then, I haven't seen 3D glasses for a while in cinema.
Yeah, true.
Anyway, that's what I got for you.
I find it a slightly controversial take that you think Snap is doing well as a company.
Snap is doing well from a user growth perspective. I don't know if they're doing well as a company. I'm just talking about user growth, and their user growth is typically within the younger population, and they're doing really well in emerging markets. So that's why I thought it was fascinating. So I'm not making any comments on the platform or financial situation or anything like that. All I'm saying is they're buying a lot of companies and they're having user growth, which makes it at least interesting to look at. Right? Don't judge the platform just because you don't use it. All right.
No, I'm judging the financials of the platform. They're not in great shape. But okay, that's fine.
Yeah. I'm not sure about that. I just mean user growth perspective, and they bought a bunch of stuff, so I don't know what they're doing. But there's something there. Like if your users are growing, and you're buying interesting AI companies, like surely there's something you can do with it.
I find it really interesting seeing where these like tech companies expand into. Like it's not an obvious play necessarily for Snap to go into augmented reality. Like it went down that path pretty early on. And it's just that's just a curious one, right? Like they went from just being pictures to being pictures plus messages. And then when AI came out, they kind of like did this Snap AI thing that you could just talk to it. But going into AR is not like super synergistic. Well, it's not obviously super synergistic. So it's an interesting play nonetheless.
So I think Evan Spiegel, right? That's the founder. He did this whole thing around like the camera is the future of humanity, like just the camera tech in general. And so it's broadened the horizon and just like not just focused on Snapchat and impermanence pictures and stuff like that, which I think that narrative only came about afterwards. I think they bought a VR headset company. So they bought a AR glasses company.
Do you think Google Glass is going to come back? Not literally Google Glass, but that same overall structure, just like glasses with like a little screen instead of the full in Vision Pro.
Potentially. I mean, like Zuckerberg's already made a video about his.
Yeah.
Like he did a voice.
What did you think about that? No, it was just like a 200-second video that his buddy like recorded of him on the couch.
Yeah, I didn't actually watch it. I just saw it like on my feed and then like didn't get it. I've like saved it for later.
He basically just like broke down all the things where Apple Vision Pro's said to be better, and then explained why the Quest is actually better, basically.
Oh, okay. It's funny. My takeaway, having not watched the video, was assuming that that wasn't Zuckerberg. That was a rendered version of him wearing the Quest.
It kind of was, because it was recorded on his buddy's like Quest, so the guy was like watching Zuckerberg through the, but it was like in person, so it was the pass through being recorded.
Right. Okay. When I saw the pass through comment, I thought it was you know how in Apple Vision Pro you can have the goggles on and then FaceTime someone and you see their face. I thought that's what he was doing. So he was wearing the thing and then, yeah, anyway. Okay, not as cool as I thought. Yeah, I think there's definitely going to be a war on spatial computing. I mean, that's what they're calling it now. I have seen heaps of reviews on the Apple Vision Pro. The lock-on system is really cool. Like, I'm surprised how well they can do lock-on. Like, a screen can just, like, stay put and you can run around and stuff like that and it'll stay exactly where it's meant to be. That must have been a lot of engineering. I'd like...
So I would generally swipe right on virtual reality and augmented reality, or like mixed reality, I think is what they're calling it now. But I think I'm going to swipe left on the Snapchat patent.
That's okay. I won't take it personally. Just go cry myself to sleep tonight. No, I think the Snap reading glasses. You know, I started with the low firepower. I've got the bigger firepower for a bit later, so it's okay. Yeah, this is sort of my you know the straw man tactic where you put like the straw man idea and then burn it down and you have the good idea behind it. Have you heard of that?
I only have good ideas, so I couldn't possibly use that idea.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, this is why I get $5 an hour and you get 5,000, right? Like
I don't understand this joke. You get paid from your startup, don't you? I don't. It's the opposite. Okay, so mine's kind of like it's definitely a big company vibe, but people might have seen in the news recently that Neuralink got their first clinical patient, so like first human to get this brain chip implanted in them, which I think is pretty cool. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit and sort of explain exactly what actually is going on here. So essentially, a few months ago, they put out a call for clinical trial volunteers. So you don't get paid for this trial, but you have to be, there's a couple of conditions. You have to be fully quadriplegic. You have to be completely unable to move, basically. You have to have a carer. You have to be over 22, a couple of these sort of like things. And essentially what they do is they use this robot called the R1, and they surgically implant a little chip, sort of like a hefty coin, sits on the top of your brain, around here, I think. And it has 1,024 electrodes across 64 threads that sort of get like embedded into that part of your brain. So they sort of lay it out at sort of the surface of this brain with a little bit of depth. So most of the brain chips in general are very surface level, but we have not figured out how to insert them deeply into the brain safely and repeatedly and do anything with that makes it worth the risk. So it's still planted on the surface. And right here is your motor cortex. So this is, I think it's called the prime motor cortex, which is the part of your brain that's generally responsible for thinking about movement. Not the part that is actually responsible for doing the movement, but the part that's responsible for like generating that intent. And then they've essentially, they map these brain signals that are happening in this part of your brain. And they use that to allow you to control phones and computers, which is pretty sick. So it's not your traditional sort of like epileptic treatment attempts, but it's very much focused on people with like ALS or spinal injuries, traumatic brain injuries, etc., that have left them unable to move. Yeah, and the idea is that it interprets that neural activity, and then by being able to like operate other devices, you kind of minimize, or it's not a therapy, obviously, for the injury, but it's a device that allows you to minimize the impact of that injury on your actual day-to-day life. So you can, go full Stephen Hawking, but without having to do everything through like tiny little eye movements. You can do it through just thinking about stuff. You can play video games and you can move things around. Basically, I mean, once you can communicate with the computer, you can do quite a lot from there.
There was a cool video actually of I think it was a chimpanzee. I don't know, something from the ape genus was doing a joystick game and then like sort of controlling these blocks, and then they unplugged the joystick and then just like, because they mapped the brain patterns of like what an up movement is, what a down movement is, the ape was just moving this like block with its mind, and I was like, that's crazy. But it kept doing the joystick just to have the pattern, but it wasn't plugged in, and they like made a big show of it.
I've
Like,
always been surprised at how little brainwave data you need to get these kinds of interfaces working. I mean, they're super primitive still, but like you would
yeah,
kind of would have expected the brain to be a lot more complicated in terms of the signal and turning that into something. So I went deeper on that concept as well. And there's a whole series of like researchers and startups working in this space. One of the really cool things is being able to actually happens, was recently published out of Singapore mid last year, I think. And they were able to demonstrate that you could read people's brainwaves and turn them into images. So what they did was that they'd put you in an fMRI and they would show you an image and then look at your brainwave and then show you an image and look at your brainwave. And like with enough of that data, they would be able to map what picture you were looking at to what your brainwaves look like. And then they would try to do the reverse process and essentially say, given these brainwaves, what image are you thinking about? Or like, what image are you looking at right now? And the results are creepily like accurate. So let me see if I can get this link.
that's nuts. That's actually getting into Black Mirror territory of like, you know, replaying your memories. And I don't want that to happen. I don't want to replay my memories. Some things I want to forget.
Let me show you this. So yeah, there's all these like privacy concerns that people are now raging about for obvious reasons. Let me see if I can find the actual picture. Here it is. So this image on the left is what they were looking at. And then the image in red was what they were able to render. Like this is very reminiscent of like the generative AI pictures that we saw, you know, like 10 years ago coming out of DeepMind for the first time. And you can see how quickly this is going to converge on something with enough data.
Oh my god. Yeah, we need to interview someone in this space. This is fascinating. Brainwave space.
Anyway, that was my first idea, my first pitch.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's definitely a swipe. Right. Yes, swipe. It's a yes.
I do take it personally.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Super scary. Yeah. Imagine like the IoT security concerns on devices that can like read your mind.
I think also just getting implants into your brain or implants in general, like, you know, become this hackable sort of entity. That's a little bit scary as well. Like, just to think about, you know, you're now online, which means you're susceptible to every kind of attack that can come through. So, yeah, 0-day attack on your brain. That'll be fun.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to write mode. Read mode is at least, but write mode, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, write mode has some really interesting implications around like restoring movement to people, right? Like for certain people, you can restore sight to certain people.
Can you restore? Have they been able to restore sight with this? I wasn't aware of that. I knew that they'd done like epileptic.
I don't know if they've done that, but I think that was stated as one of the.
I know they use it for epilepsy, and I think there are some considerations to use it for Parkinson's to try and help essentially soothe the neuronal activity that goes haywire in those diseases.
I mean, we're kind of already doing this. If you think about a cochlear implant as a very like primitive version of this, it's essentially taking sound waves and then directly electrically stimulating your cochlea, which goes to your brain. So like we are in some sense writing to the brain in a very elementary way. It's kind of like the DOS system right now, but you know, there are production systems out there which is evolving that, now going directly to the brain essentially.
Ready Player One is going to happen for sure. Like you've got the AI, you've got the mixed reality, and soon you're going to have direct brain writes. Like we're going to be in the Matrix in like 3 years.
Oh my god, yeah. Oh yeah, I'm keen, bro.
We should do our next episode like in ABP.
Yeah. Yeah, we can try. Yeah, I just need to go find a $7,000 Apple Vision Pro down the street. Like it's such a rip.
What is wrong with the Australian dollar?
Yeah, 6.99. Because I genuinely thought about it. I was like, oh, maybe I should go buy one. It'll be fun. And I looked at the price and I was like, yeah, no. Could buy a second car.
Yeah, but the car can only take you a few places. The APP can take you anywhere, AJ.
That's true. All right. Speaking of Apple, I've got one of their latest patents on using optical sensors to detect voice. So there is a use case of being able to send a laser and then like depending on how that essentially interacts with your sound waves, because obviously sound waves make the air go back and forth because that's what sound waves are. the interactions with that and the light that it receives back or bouncing off that air or the person's skin or mouth or teeth or whatever, it can make a better approximation as to what they're saying. And so microphones in the future could be a mix between audio sensors, optical sensors, and maybe even gyroscopic sensors and like other stuff.
That is insane. I wouldn't think that we had. I mean, okay, we obviously have sensors enough sensors that are sensitive enough to detect perturbations in light caused by sound, but not for commercial like grade hardware. I didn't think. That's insane.
Yeah, I mean they've just put the patent in, so I don't think it's getting live yet. But look at this amazing diagram explaining how this is working. But yeah, light sensors. Yeah, why do they have to make the drawings so complicated?
Surely there's some requirement to draw a pattern in like this dumb way in order to be able to describe it in its essence.
Yeah, I think so. I think it has to be really simple, black and white drawing, cannot be overly complex or like so overly colored or anything like that. So yeah, I think there's definitely some sort of restrictions around that. Otherwise, these big companies wouldn't be having drawings that look like this. I mean, Apple especially, that is very design oriented. Yeah, so that's my second one.
That's pretty cool. So is the idea that this would just act as an extra dimension of data input for trying to pick up what people are saying, or that you could actually, just with this alone, figure out what someone is saying?
So I think it is to augment the audio microphones. However, it could also be used to like, I guess there is a use case where it could just like generate the sound. Now that we have AI voice generation, things like that, it is using AI to process it and decipher what the person is saying. But I think the more sort of data points you have, the better they can do voice isolation, get rid of wind, other things that might be happening, which I think is actually a good thing. Having done meetings, outside in a storm, like while it's raining, things like that. Like it's just would be nice to have amazing noise cancellation.
I wonder how a device like this would work in that context, though. Like, you'd have to shine the beam on yourself.
So I think it would be reading your lips. I think the simplest use case is it's just reading your lips, right? So if you had a camera on your face, just detecting based on your lips and teeth movement, what are you saying?
Your teeth aren't meant to move, AJ. They're meant to be solid in place. And
Have you ever spoken while keeping your teeth in place?
my jaw moves. My teeth are stationary.
Your teeth are moving relative to the air. So, I don't know why you're biting me on this. Anyway, the way that one speaks, if you're interested in how phonation works, is your tongue moves relative to your hard palate and your soft palate, and also your teeth and then your lips. So those are the ways that you make sounds, right? So you want to make a butt sound, you got to use your mouth. Whereas if you want to, you use your hard palate and your teeth. So there's different things that you have to do to make sound happen. And I'm sure that if you use a camera and some AI, you could generate the sound that way, right? So I think this is just a more fancy way of doing it by having more optical sensors detecting.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, generating sound by just lip reading, essentially, or mouth reading, teeth reading, is less interesting because it's kind of like, it doesn't feel deep. Like, it's just like, yeah, it's like, I think AI's made so much progress and that kind of stuff falls into like trad tech now, But laser beams to detect the perturbation of like molecules in the air and decode that into sound. That's pretty sick and would require some serious work. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a swipe right. It's not super light. It's definitely a swipe right though. I think everyone has experienced low quality audio. They're probably experiencing it right now because I'm recording this on Apple AirPods. But maybe in a few years, the Apple AirPods will be even better than a mic.
I guess my point was sort of like shooting myself in the foot here, but my point was more that like this seems like a fairly over-engineered solution to the actual outcome. Whereas like if we're getting really good with AI voice generation, where we can clone someone else's voice, and we know for a fact that people can lip read pretty well, that we could use an AI to lip read and just generate your voice, which seems like a much simpler solution than trying to figure out how the air molecules are moving outside your mouth, right? So that was sort of the end point that notes I was sort of making.
You arrived at exactly where I arrived, which is I think noise cancellation stops being noise cancellation and starts just being voice generation. So you have an AI that's know what someone's saying, figure out approximately what it is that they're saying, very precisely what they're saying as just text. And then you've pre-recorded a bunch of sounds of this person speaking in high quality, and then you just re-render that on the other side.
Yeah, exactly. Which It's kind of how telephones work in some way, right? Like you speak, your sound waves get turned into electricity, electricity is transmitted, turned back into sound waves, right? So why don't we just add another layer, turn it into AI, and then generate the voice altogether? I'll take this swipe right. I've got one down and one good.
All
So
right, shall I give you my next one? My next one's kind of geeky, and I'm not sure it'll make
mhm.
sense to most people or why I'm excited about it. But I'm excited about it because I faced this problem. So there's this company called SimplyBlock, which recently raised just shy of $3 million for their company. Basically, modern computing platforms are highly distributed. So you have a lot of different machines in a lot of different places. And this is because machines can only go so fast. So if you're renting hardware in the cloud, let's say, and you want to deal with 1 million active users, one machine can't really do that, depending on the kind of workload that each user consumes. And so you need a bunch of different machines, but they all need to agree on what the state is. So they all need to agree on what actually exists on the platform in terms of the data, like what posts have been posted and what photos have been liked, so that everyone still sees, to the best of your abilities, the same information at the same time. So, for example, YouTube is obviously distributed across, I don't even know how many millions of servers they must have, but everyone, for the most part, can find the same videos, regardless of which part of the world that they're in or which computer they happen to be accessing. So it's all about how do you get these distributed computers to access what is also ultimately distributed storage, because especially when you're YouTube and you're dealing with something like a petabyte of data a day, that's not being stored on a single computer. That's also being stored all around the world, different machines. That's an insanely hard problem to solve. And for the most part, cloud provider solutions aren't very good, and they leave you needing to solve these yourselves. And so the idea behind SimplyBlock is that it takes these cloud providers, specifically I think they're tailored for AWS right now, and turns the sort of like dumb storage blocks that you can just sort of acquire from AWS, and adds all of this intelligent capability on top of it so that it can, like automatically cache things, it can automatically back things up, it can automatically create new volumes when you need them, and sort of make your distributed storage environment look like it's not distributed and look like it's just one unified massive machine, even though it's not actually practically. And that's just a really nice mental model. Like when you're a programmer and you're writing code, the last thing you want to be able to do, have to do, is think about where your data is coming from and how it's reaching you. It's much nicer to have an abstraction where you just say, let's just pretend I've just got one massive fuck off hard drive and I'm just doing a simple operation on that hard drive.
Okay, so if you were to simplify this into simple problem statement and solution, is it we are currently hitting speed limits with the current load speeds when it comes to distributed content, distributed compute, and this will help us.
It's a simplicity play. And I think simplicity always comes with speed, because if you make something simpler to use and you put all the work into that hard stuff behind the scenes, people aren't going to have to write it themselves and inevitably fuck up, and they're not specialists at it. And so they're going to end up having a slower, less good solution than a bunch of experts in the space. So the idea is more that data is now stored across many, many places, and that's very hard to model mentally. And how do you make that go away so that your average programmer doesn't have to think about this?
Okay, so is it improving my speed to deployment? Like I don't need to less
It
overhead.
would, in principle, improve your speed to deployment because you don't have to worry about implementing solutions for this kind of stuff, which you would otherwise have to. It means that your latency is probably going to be lower. It also means that your cloud costs are going to be lower because often you're using more, very, very realistically, what happens a lot of the time is that you end up using suboptimal storage solutions because it's just hard to even figure out which storage you should be using when. Because in a cloud, there are many, many layers of storage and they all cost different amounts. And being able to have a system that can intelligently shift data around between these different types of storage, keep them all in sync, make sure your costs are being minimized, whereas the data that you're accessing a lot is still being accessed very quickly. And then also not allocating too much data. So there's this challenge where you say, okay, I think I need 10 gigabytes to service my users, but the last thing I want is my system to go offline because I miscalculated. So I'm just going to get 100 gigabytes, and then I know I'm in the clear. But now I'm paying for 10x the storage that I actually needed. And that's sort of like the really dumb way of doing it, but it's really fast. And so if you're a startup, you're just like, screw it, I'm just going to do that because it's simple and it's quick. It's obviously suboptimal from a pricing perspective.
So this is a simpler infrastructure solution, both for the developers and also theoretically better speed.
Yeah, exactly. And in theory, you could do this yourself, but being someone from the distributed computing environment, I can tell you it's not an easy technical thing to pull off.
So I like this, but also what I've realized is you have like you have an itch that you haven't scratched yet, because every single time you bring up this something similar, or like something in the infrastructure space or the cloud space, and it just sounds like you're gonna do something.
No one's built Muir yet, so that's still in the future.
I think you definitely have to do it because you clearly your info diet is all of this.
Not even. So in preparation for this podcast, I was looking at Crunchbase and looking at recent funding rounds, and this was like the most recent funding round on Crunchbase, and I clicked it and I was like,
Mm,
oh shit, this is dope.
okay, that's fair. Yeah, I think this makes a lot of sense. But what do you think is the hard part about what they're doing?
So I think, well, there's hard and there's risky, right? And I think those are different concerns. One
Mm,
of the risky parts of what they're doing is that they're hyper tailored to AWS. So AWS doesn't have a history of randomly changing shit under the hood, but they could easily clone you and then you're screwed, right? I mean, if you want to talk about a company that has a lot of distributed storage experts and has an incentive to provide all of these same solutions, and as a culture of trying to make things cheap for the customer, you don't want to be over indexed to a single cloud storage provider. And that can be really risky because some cloud providers offer things that other cloud providers don't. And so if you make your storage solution only available for AWS and you leverage really AWS specific features, that's fantastic. But what if your customer doesn't use AWS? What if they use Azure? What if they use Google Cloud? So you're taking a bet that AWS continues to win the cloud space. And I don't think that's a safe bet. There's talks about Meta moving into cloud. There's, Google has and Azure have taken huge chunks of AWS's potential pie in the last, 5 years. And I think that trend continues with how aggressive Microsoft has managed to be in the AI space. But I think that the hard part is, the non-technical hard part is always the same. It's just there's definitely product market fit here, but it's distribution strategy. How do you get this to people? How do you convince a startup that they should pay you X dollars a month per gigabyte? I guess you charge by the byte, and that's actually going to be better for them. Because as someone who's deeply in the space or was deeply in the space, I can tell you how hard this problem is. I can tell you how much pain it will cause you down the line. You don't have to sell me. But if you aren't deeply technical in this space, it's easy to underestimate how hard this problem is to solve and how much money you can waste by not solving it properly. And so trying to educate users that aren't technical in that specific subgenre of computing, I think that's going to be one of their challenges.
Yeah, I think often it comes down to like inertia and switching costs, right? Like a lot of customers start with AWS because they get a free plan, they get free credits for a while, they're pretty generous with it as well. And by the time you've built your infrastructure and like spent all this time on it, you build your company for 3 years, you're already so ingrained that's really hard for you to even think about switching. And I think that's why the free credits are such a popular strategy for cloud companies, right? To do all this startup stuff.
What you'll notice if you pay attention is that the free credits don't come from the Ireland organization. They come from whatever your local organization is. So let's say you're making a few $100 million in the US from US-centric companies. You start a US subco of your cloud provider. It dishes out, however many credits, $100 million worth of credits, and it has to purchase those credits from the actual company, which is based in Ireland. And so the US company makes nothing. It purchases $100 million of credits and then gives them out for free and says, well, that's an operating cost. And then the company in Ireland makes all the money. So it's got multiple benefits.
Okay. Oh, that's cool. I didn't even think about that. That makes sense. Okay, so to move back to the block stuff. So I'm like looking at their page, which is SimplyBlock versus Amazon EBS, and then I realized I don't even understand what a block is.
It's the cloud equivalent of a hard drive or like a USB stick.
Okay. Okay. The other thing I see is it's cost efficient, so it's as low as 0.0022 US dollars per gigabyte per month, which is 5 times lower than Amazon. Now here's my question. How much of Amazon's like pricing is actually just like margins versus like the actual cost? Like that's great. You can be cheaper than them. But are you just like undercutting their price for the sake of it? Like, or is it?
And that was kind of my point about risks, right? Like the last thing you want to be trying to do is undercut Amazon on pricing. They're going to win that game.
Yeah, just in general, undercutting pricing is not the best strategy for entering a market that's quite like monopolized by a couple of players. Like,
yeah, I think also the open source community will eventually catch up with this as well. And that's going to be a real challenge. Is that groups like the Kates community, they do not underestimate, well, Don't underestimate how overcomplicated they make things, but also don't underestimate how many complicated problems they can solve.
So, do you have an answer for that? Like,
According to their filings, their margins are anywhere between 30 and 50%, but I don't know what the breakdown of that is. It's going to be like the McDonald's problem, right? Where like you actually, the hamburgers are a loss leader and you make all your money on fries and drinks. So maybe it's the case that storage is a loss leader, or maybe it's the case that computers are the loss leader and actually they make all their money on storage. I don't know what that breakdown looks like.
okay, I'm gonna give this I'm gonna swipe last. I think it's interesting, but I'm not really sure exactly how they're going to compete or how they're going to win. And then from a deep tech perspective, like interesting, like we've talked about the space for a while, but I'm not seeing anything. Like, well, tell me about the engineering. Like, do you think it's like, is there really intense engineering going on here? Like, what's so special about what they're doing?
It's just like solving these distributed. I mean, you've been on the inside of what it's like to try and build a blockchain company, right? And one of the key challenges around building a blockchain company is how do you deal with distributed data problems? How do you actually make an application that's sharded across thousands of machines look like one unified state? And that is just an unsolved problem in terms of what the best way to do that is. And to do it in a way that's low latency, in a way that's reliable, in a way that everyone actually does eventually see the same state, and that the gap between how quickly something gets into the state and how quickly everyone sort of agrees that that's what it looks like. All the same problems that you would be familiar with in the blockchain space are real and present in the centralized computing space. The difference is just like the type of algorithm that you use, and you're trying to deal with milliseconds of block times instead of 30-second block times.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I think I'm just still gonna stay with my rating, but I want you to know it's not you, it's me. I can't fully appreciate it, so that's why that's how I'm gonna do it. We've got two left. I'm gonna stick to one. So my third one is the AI thing I talked about. So it is prompt to 3D model. So prompting and designing 3D models, which I think is a really interesting space. So the company called 3DFi.ai, which I can share the website. So basically what happens is, you just type in a prompt and it will generate like whatever you want. The website's sick. You probably can't see it for some reason. It's not loading the entire thing on the screen share, but if you go to the website, it's just a beautifully designed website, which, I know you shouldn't get sold on the look of the website as like the main thing, but it does really help with the value proposition. So you type in a prompt and it'll generate a 3D model. Here's some of the interesting things about like the tech side of things. So what happens is that it uses something called neural radiance field instead of a typical CAD model. So just to talk you through how a CAD model would work, typically if you were to make something on a CAD, let's say you want to make a cylinder, you would draw a circle and then extrude it out and you would make a cylinder. That's how you make it in SolidWorks or any Autodesk or any kind of CAD software that I did in university. Now, the good thing about that is if you wanted to change the side's length or if you wanted to scale it up and down, it's not too difficult. However, the way that they generate this is that they use a bunch of 2D images to then splice into this like 3D representation. And it essentially creates a point cloud. So imagine like, 300, 400, 5,000 points that sort of collectively make this 3D model. Difficulty of that is if you wanted to edit it or make some like engineering parameter changes, it can be quite difficult. So typically with engineering, it'd be a little bit more ideal if you had a parameter based model where you can actually tweak it a little bit rather than this like point cloud model. So I think that's currently one of the limitations of it.
Interesting. I think like,
let me show you what it looks like on the platform.
One of the key criticisms I've heard of prompt to 3D is that natural language is a terrible medium through which to describe something that's 3D. So is it like what's their use case here? Are we about to see it? Are you going to generate? Is this their?
So I mean, these are the current use cases. They have table lamps, sofas, tables, like all that kind of stuff, and then swords and shields and axes. So I made a sword. Typed in I wanted a two-sided sword. I tried to make a fairly complex prompt with a circular handle in the middle, so the swords can rotate around it. Didn't know what to expect. It generated this.
What was the prompt?
What I just read. So I wanted a two-sided sword with a circular handle in the middle, so the swords can rotate around it.
What is that even? What were you imagining? Because that looks. I don't know what the rotation thing means.
I don't know. I just thought maybe like Imagine like Darth Maul's like lightsaber, but then there's like a circular handle.
Oh, that kind of rotate. Okay. See what I mean? Though? It's a terrible medium through which to describe what you want because the level of detail that you have to go through.
Yeah. So this is the discussion, right? So I called one of my friends who works in manufacturing and I was like, hey, like, what are your thoughts on 3D modeling using AI? And he was the one who was telling me, like, right now it just uses point clouds and like that's not super useful for us because it'd be easier if it generated
Yeah.
some sort of engineering model so we can tweak it, so we can change the side lens, so we can like make customizations. And I guess your point actually makes a lot of sense too, which is like just typing that out isn't enough information. Like you need to, maybe give inputs on what is the wall that you're attaching it to, or like what surfaces does it need to come in contact with, what kind of size does it need to be, all this additional information that I think is really difficult right now. But I do think it's a fascinating use case to get to the point where you can talk to something, just
Well, I think also just, I mean, content libraries are a thing, right? So back in my 3D modeling days, you'd load in an object from a content library and you would then start making modifications to it as your base. And I certainly think that if you can get away from point clouds towards something like parameter based, then it's a perfect way to get started with something, right? It's like you've got this vision in your head of a Darth Maul sword that can rotate. So you're like, okay, just give me a sword. With some basic descriptions, you can tweak that a little bit, tweak your prompt until you kind of get bored of that. And you're like, okay, I pushed the prompting as far as I can. Now I'm going to go in and start making modifications manually. And there are tons of algorithms for turning. I mean, I guess what surprises me about why if you can go from a point cloud to like a hull, like a series of triangles that all join together that you can then manipulate the vertices and the faces and it sort of parameterize in that way using like isosurface renderings. So you can do this. And I don't imagine it's going to be too long before you can go from a prompt to that kind of model that can then be easily edited. But I think it's a gimmick until you can get there.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. I think that makes sense. I think I like the idea of it. I don't know if it's like, is there anything like tangible that's going to happen in the future? Like maybe every single person has like a 3D printer in their home, which they can just request stuff from. And there's like a Jarvis that's like there. And it's like, oh, you know what? I need a coat hanger. And like, you know what my closet looks like. Can you like make something for me? And it just sort of generates a model, prints it out for you. And you have this little thing. Is that the future? Maybe, maybe not. Is there any use case in like commercial production lines? I think maybe speeding up the flow of like a CAD draftsman or a manufacturer. But I think there's still, I still think there's a long way to go when it comes to like how we're going to incorporate it in the engineering procedures for physical products, in my opinion.
I think, engineering is a lot further away, but ideation, that's a fair point. Indie games, you don't have to get to, like, you have to get over the cloud because games don't work like that, but that's trivial to do. So, ideating on concepts and sitting in VR and getting crazy stuff generating in front of you from your voice and getting inspired from that, I think is. But what's the market for that? How much are these AI companies raising?
Yeah, we'll see. I didn't actually check if these guys raised any money. I just decided to start for this particular one. I decided to start with the concept and see if there's a company out there that did it. So I typed in prompt to 3D model and this came up.
Does Cinder have like a save for later feature where you can like bookmark a profile and like decide later, or do you have to go stack top to bottom?
So I think so I learned a little bit more about Tinder from a friend of mine recently, and he said that if you pay for the premium version, you can rewind.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, in that case, I'm gonna swipe left.
No, only if you transfer me $5, then I'll let you rewind. If you'd like.
I'll do that. Oh, yeah, I'll pay $5 for an option on this.
Yeah, nice.
I'm gonna swipe left and then I'll rewind to it in 2 years and see if they've gone over some of these hurdles.
Easiest $5 I've made in my life.
I don't know yet to pull off an hour-long podcast for it. Like, that's not a good hourly rate.
That's true. I got to do all this research. Speaking of which, we're going to be talking about the technocratic oath. What is that, Loong? Do you remember?
Okay, so apparently the idea is that if you ask people to pay for something that's free by instead of paying, asking them to do something for you, and if you explicitly make that ask, apparently it works really well. And so we created the technocratic oath, which is that we do this podcast for free, obviously, as you can tell by its quality. And so how you're going to pay for this is that you're going to like it, you're going to subscribe, you're going to share it with people, and you're going to let people know about it so that we can grow this thing that we're doing for reasons unknown to both of us.
Yeah, and actually, you guys didn't realize this, but we actually implanted the N1 Neuralink in your brain. And so you have no choice. It's going to happen. We're already writing to your brain right now, and you're going to be liking, subscribing, and sharing to your friends. So it doesn't matter. You can fight against it, but you're going to do it this week.
What?
I don't know. I thought I'd try something different this week.
I can't wait till I could just do this podcast with you via Neuralink.
Yeah, that's true. And last thing I want to say, if we get 100 likes, then we will do a deep dive on nuclear fusion. But we need 100 likes on this particular episode. So let's see how we go. Actually, I really want to do this episode. Let's say 50, because at least then I can sit there and like it 50 times if I really have to. But let's get to that like goal, and then we can see how we go with this episode, and we can try and find a guest for nuclear fusion too, because I think it's a really fascinating topic. I actually did research for this episode to do it. Then I realized I could do a whole episode on it, so I decided not to bring it up as an idea.
Okay, well, next episode, nuclear fusion, 50 likes. Let's make it happen.
Awesome. All right, thanks guys. See you later.